Hey, Pat, you want to know the only thing I don't eat for breakfast
Lunch.
and dinner? Everyone, welcome back to Brand Coverage. I'm Brandon Carney alongside Pat Gustafson. And needless to say, the last week or so has been almost completely filled with emotional turmoil that I did not expect to happen, Pat. It was, yeah, let me set the stage. It was a peaceful, Friday morning, I think it was.
It
And
was.
I wake up. I see that I have 90 unread text messages. Now, I'm in two different group chats, one of which we'll just say this. It's not a surprise to wake up to that many messages, right? The other one is a little less active, but a little more UConn focused. That one is a surprise if I wake up to 90 unread texts. So when I opened my messages app and saw that that was the group chat that had 90 unread messages, I was a little suspicious. Scroll up to see what the first one was that started the conversation, and it was Dan Hurley being targeted by the Los Angeles Lakers for their head coaching position. I spiraled almost immediately.
Oh, dude.
This is not the time of year to be dealing with a potential head coaching change, let alone him just leaving potentially in general. That hadn't really crossed my mind this soon. Yes, if you follow UConn and if you're as plugged in as we are, you know that Dan Hurley has at least vague aspirations of coaching in the NBA one day. We did not think it was going to happen this soon. Luckily, it all worked out for us, but Jesus Christ, what a few days that was. Pat, what was your how did you process and handle these last few days?
Waking up, I woke up at like 6:30 Eastern time, which, gross. And I kind of was just checking my phone, whatever. And like literally, like I saw the Woj tweet appear on my timeline, and I couldn't fall back asleep. Like I was not okay in that moment. And, even as a Lakers fan, I was not okay. I saw one of my friends that night, and they said, wow, you must be in a pickle. I'm like, there's no fucking pickle over here. I don't want him. I don't want him to leave. I don't want him to experience that. The entire time, I was kind of leaning that he was staying. Like, I wasn't, like, super confident. Maybe I was just coping a little. Like, with Kentucky, I was confident. After like a day or two being, I was kind of like, okay, he's sticking around. He's not going anywhere. And just because like the NBA is such a win now league, and especially the Lakers. Like I was looking at their head coaching history after Phil Jackson, and it is just comical. It is just comical. The coaches that they've had there, they've tried Mike Brown, Mike D'Antoni, Byron Scott, Luke Walton, God forbid. Joe Gatto and now Darvin Ham, like, and Frank Vogel, the only guy who's won anything for that team in the last 15 years.
Yep.
They run him out of town less than 2 years later. Like, it is such a the expectations for that team are so unrealistic to begin with. Let alone with LeBron James breathing down your neck constantly, a guy who wants to win as much as he can before he retires. He would have been gone in 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
And, like, just for him personally, I didn't want that for him. Like, if he wants to go to the NBA, wait for the Knicks job. Wait for Tom Thibodeau to retire. You could stay. Right. You could stay over here, but I was just hoping that he kind of was looking at it the way I was looking at it, where it's like, this job is a hellhole. This job is a hellhole specifically, and you're going to uproot your whole life, uproot back-to-back national championships with a very good roster for this coming year. They will at the very least compete for, to make the Final Four again. Like, it just was going to be a bad move, and I am just so goddamn relieved that he is staying with UConn, because who knows? Who knows what the turnover would have been, had he left. I'm sure they would have promoted Kamani Young, who Kamani's great. He would have been a great replacement, but, do they lose guys? Do they lose recruits for future years? You never know. And it's just like, this cannot happen to this program right now.
And for me, Pat, it was like, other than the obvious just fear of him leaving and not wanting to leave, it was like, as UConn fans and UConn faithful, like we just got back here, like no other fan base is going to cry for us with our various national championships through the years. But like after the last decade or so that we experienced prior to the last national title last year, it was a lot of floundering and trying to build this program back up. And so I was sitting here like, look, it really only feels like we've been back for maybe a year and like 2 months, because the team last year in 2023, as you'll recall, and I've talked about many times, had a miserable January and really didn't get going until the NCAA tournament or just before. So it didn't feel like, oh, UConn is like this top program again until maybe halfway through that NCAA tournament. And then obviously we spent all of this past year being one of the best programs in the country and, going on the best program in the country, going on another dominant NCAA tournament run. But it's like, look, of course we're a little bit greedy, but it's like, I just want to stay like toward the top for a little. Just let me enjoy this ride. It doesn't even need to involve or include another national championship necessarily. Obviously, that'd be great, but I just want to be selfishly like a fan of the top program or one of the very top programs in college basketball for a little bit longer. Like Hurley, yes, absolutely. Go to the Knicks, take that job whenever it opens up, whether it's a year, 2 years, 5 years, whoever, whenever. But for now, like I just want a little bit longer, because we've experienced, Pat, what the floor can be if you end up with the wrong hire. Like, yes, UConn is, and even more so now, a very prestigious program, a lot of history, a lot of championships, 2 more now than we had 2 years ago. But still, we know
Kevin
that
Ollie tried his damnedest.
He did. I mean, look, we had 4 national titles heading into our last stretch of just horrific basketball, like absolutely abysmal play. So nothing you do, precludes you from that happening again. Not even having back-to-back national titles and such a great theoretical system and recruiting process in place. So I'm just like, I just didn't want it to go away so fast when I'm like, man, we just got back here.
And this does so much, I think, for Hurley, because now he can go to recruits and say, hey, I turned down Kentucky, one of the blue bloods, one of the few blue bloods that's bluer bleeding than we are.
For what reason, I don't know.
And the fucking Lakers.
Yeah.
To stay here and coach this team. So, like, the guy was a great recruiter anyway. But now his players know that, like, he's invested. I mean, there's been a lot of talk, like, if this was kind of like almost like a media stunt on Hurley's part. Skip Bayless is kind of spewing nonsense, but, like, and it is going to help his image, I think, in terms of college basketball. I mean, this guy has won 2 national championships already. This guy is going to Springfield. This guy is going to be in the Hall of Fame already. So 100%. It's like, he's kind of playing with house money, but like, he can be something special. Like, he's already on track to speed run right past Jim Calhoun in what Jim Calhoun's legacy was at that school. And if he's there for that long, he can certainly be the next Jim Calhoun. And it's just like, it was too soon. Well, it's only been 6 years, right? He's been there. Like, It just would have been way too soon for him to leave. If he sticks around for 3 or more years or so and then decides it's time to go coach in the NBA, more power to you. Again, he'll be playing with house money for sure by then. So, but he's not even building something special. They've already built something special. And for him to turn around where you lose 4 of your starting 5, there's a good chance that 4 of their starting 5 gets drafted. Certainly 2 of them will very early, and I think at least 1 of Tristan Newton and Cam Spencer will get drafted.
I would agree.
And he's already turned it around to the point where it's like, Hurley said that this team is the most talented team he's had there, this incoming team, which is psychotic. Yeah. Psychotic. Like, they are in a position now where it's like, again, it almost feels like if they don't win the championship, it'll be somewhat disappointing, but I guess that's kind of like fool's gold right there. It's like if that's your expectation is to contend and possibly win the national championship, you're in a good fucking spot. You're in a good spot, but just huge for the school, huge for the state of Connecticut. And this is also just going to boost his contract. They were talking Turkey to begin with. What were they offering? $12 million a year. That wasn't
at UConn or the Lakers.
No, with the Lakers, right? It was a little over 12
the Lakers,
million,
yeah, it was around 12 million. I think their final offer ended up being 6 years, $70 million, so that would take them like a little over $11 million a year. But initially it was reported to be around 12. And yeah, I mean, that contract, he's going to be, at least if we are to believe our esteemed governor, Ned Lamont, that he's going to be the highest paid college basketball coach in the country, which will put him past Bill Self, who I believe makes about $9.5 million a year or so.
I wouldn't be surprised if he gets that, like 12 from UConn, which is crazy.
It's true. I wouldn't.
Taxpayers are going to have to decide if they're going to be mad at Ned Lamont or if they're going to be happy because it's UConn basketball. They're going to have a real conundrum. I'm just happy. Who cares?
Hey, taxpayers, I will tell you this. This is the only cool thing our/your state has. So let's
have you had New Haven pizza before?
Okay, well, the pizza, that's not fair, but you're not wrong. Look, UConn is the pinnacle of entertainment in that state. So if anyone has beef with look, the taxes are already high. You add an extra $5 so we can pay Dan Hurley. Fucking get over it. So yes, at the end of the day, just thrilled he's coming back. Thrilled we get this upcoming season, Pat. And honestly, the potential mass exodus of players is what I was most worried about. I mean, yes, of course, losing a coach the caliber of Dan Hurley would have been devastating, especially happening on June 10th is what it would have been. But I think what would have been more devastating would be the potential departures of your Liam McNeelys or your Aiden Mahaney's. And granted, this is also late in the process for players, and a lot of teams have rosters filled, so they might not be able to take on these guys. But again, someone would make room for a McNeely or a Caravan or whatever you want to say. So, as much as I have faith in whatever our succession plan would have been, assuming it probably would have been Kamani Young, that's great. Doesn't mean the players would have stayed. So look, dodged a bullet. Dan Hurley has essentially repledged himself to the state of Connecticut, and I thank him for it. Even if this ends up being his last year and Tom Thibodeau calls it a career next year, that's totally fine. Just give us some time to process that. Yeah, do it early in the process of the offseason as well. But give us this season to at least think, let's enjoy what we're watching because, you never know when more change is going to come. Because we did not have change on our radar at this point. Now we will, but we did not have it coming into this. So that'll do it for our little college basketball intro to the show, guys. We'll obviously get back to football here. Real quick, be sure to check us out on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts if you're joining us live here right now on YouTube. And also rate us 5 stars if you can, or do whatever rating and comment system your preferred podcast platform allows you to do. It helps us out a lot. And if you're listening on any of those platforms, join us live on YouTube at some point because we're here. We got beards. We want to talk to you live.
I'm bald now.
Pat's bald now. I'm getting there. YouTube.com/benchwarmerbrand every Tuesday at 7:30 Eastern. We would love to have you. Now, getting into some football stuff, Pat. Even bigger news than Dan Hurley. The Madden cover has come out, Pat. It's very exciting. Christian McCaffrey is on the cover of Madden 25, Part 2, Electric Boogaloo. I don't know. I remember thinking that when they did it 12 years ago, that I was like, what are you going to do when 2025 gets here? Even though in my little brain, I couldn't fathom that 2025 would actually ever arrive. But here, it's almost here. Madden 25 is about to be here, and Christian McCaffrey's on the cover. Look, there's nothing to really analyze here. I thought it was going to be Joe Burrow just strictly based on the teaser I saw, which in my head didn't make a lot of sense. No, in my head it didn't make a lot of sense because obviously Burrow barely played last year, but it was basically like it didn't show a player, but it showed like behind a cameraman's head, and you heard EA Sports, it's in the game, and it was obviously whoever the cover athlete was that was saying it, not the normal voice. And it just sounded like Burrow to me. And there were like hints of orange in the shot, but it turns out I might just be colorblind, and it was hints of red, and it was Christian McCaffrey talking. Good for Christian McCaffrey. I mean, great player, deserving cover. I'm just glad that it's a good player that they're throwing on there.
The last Madden game I owned was Madden 25. So that just goes to show how much I care about the. He's the first running back since Peyton Hillis to don the cover.
Oh dear,
that's a big deal. Mm-hmm. Yeah, whatever happened? Oh god, he fell off, and then he's a hero. That man's a hero. And
Peyton Hillis is a hero. This is true.
And he will always be able to say he was on the fucking Madden cover.
The funniest Madden cover. I think a good lesson
no doubt.
for Madden in general. Like a good lesson for them to not... Because that was, I believe, a result of a fan vote. And I mean, granted...
Oh, was it? That's hilarious.
I think so. And granted, I'm sure fans were memeing a little bit because Peyton Hillis, big white running back who just came out of nowhere.
It was good.
I think even the fans that voted on it, I don't think projected the insane fall off that would have happened. He was truly a one-year wonder. I think he went on to have some stints with the Broncos, the Chiefs, the Giants after that, and it just none of it was very good.
It was him and Michael Vick were the final.
Oh, dear.
And in the semifinal, he beat Ray Rice, good, Matt Ryan, and Aaron Rodgers to even get to the final.
Man, what
against
a time,
Michael Vick, who was
what a
the
time
Madden
capsule.
Was there a better player to use in Madden than Michael Vick and this guy Peyton Hillis?
Yeah,
beat him
that's
for
true.
the cover.
That is a very symbolic victory for him. Well, Christian McCaffrey is on this year's Madden cover, Madden 25 Part 2, Electric Boogaloo. Shout out to him.
You gonna buy it? You still play?
Am I going to buy it? Yeah, probably. I stream it like once in a blue moon because it's a football video game and I do football things. But also, you could actually buy it like in a bundle with college football, whatever the fuck it's called, college football 25. I don't know how they officially name it.
That's smart
but
marketing.
You can save like a little.
Game is going to be.
Yeah, you could save a little bit of money by buying them together. It's like you save like $10 or $20, but I'm probably just going to do that. And it's also a tax write-off for me, so nice. All right, moving on here, Pat.
Is everything a tax write-off?
If I attempt to work with it, yes. Mike Tomlin signing a contract extension the other day, Pat. 3-year extension. This is any other year, this wouldn't have really been a notable move, but it certainly is right now after a couple months of speculation of if they could potentially move on from Mike Tomlin, which
I said they should have.
You did. Really, that was if you guys will recall, no slight against Mike Tomlin. It was one of those cases where, sometimes a voice can just start to fade in a locker room if it's in there for too long, and the messaging may not come across as well as it once did. Yeah, there was a question of if Mike Tomlin, if that was happening. It seems like the Steelers don't believe it was. Now, granted, you can certainly get out from under a coach extension much easier than a player extension. It doesn't count against the cap or anything like that. So this doesn't really prevent like him being fired after this year if they had like a miserable season, but it does show a little bit of a vote of confidence, especially to the public after what was a less than ideal season and just a less than ideal couple of seasons. I mean, they've, Mike Tomlin, he never had a losing season. Yeah, but they're also barely floating above 500 most of the time. This shows that they have some faith in him to get it back on track. Will he do that with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields at the helm? I don't know. But I'm happy for Mike Tomlin because he seems just like a really good dude. He's a very
great
good coach, and I hope.
that guy's going to be in. That guy's going to be in the Hall of Fame. Well deserved as well. Like they hired him by accident, basically. They brought him in to fulfill the Rooney Rule. He was the last guy they brought in. I don't know. I don't remember who the guy they were set on, but they were so impressed by him that they hired the guy, and that was 15 years ago, I think. So, a good guy, easy guy to root for, and are they going to turn it around? Probably not. Are they going to be 9-8? Probably. Is that going to be good enough? Is that going to be good enough for the 7th seed? Maybe. So, I feel like more of the same. More of the same coming in the Steel City.
9-8 would be more than viable for a Russell Wilson and or Justin Fields led Pittsburgh Steelers team, despite their defense being objectively pretty good, or at least TJ Watt's objectively pretty good. We'll see what the Steelers have in store this year, see if Mike Tomlin can make that extension worth it. All right, Pat, we talked about this as a possibility a few times. I, in fact, thought it happened at one point, but now it's actually happened. Darren Waller has announced his retirement.
Hang on. Talk for a minute.
Will do. Talked about it a little bit last week with Darren Waller. Just an incredible story, incredible career with Darren Waller, overcoming addiction issues and really going from just nameless practice squatter to one of the best tight ends in football and a fantasy football revelation as well. I recall drafting him in that breakout season. I think it was him and TJ Hawkinson. I took in like the double-digit rounds back to back. And just a really cool memory, for me, having a guy like that break out on my team, make me look like a genius, but also just a testament to him being able to turn things around like that. And, his Giants tenure didn't go the way we expected it to, but you still can't call this career anything less than a massive success given the way it started, Pat. So Darren Waller retiring, looking at where this leaves the Giants now. I mean, we talked about it a little bit last week. Again, Malik Neighbors is Pat had to go get his Darren Waller Oakland Raiders jersey, I assume. I mean,
this was Vegas. This was Vegas. They were in Vegas. I got it in Vegas.
That's right. My timelines are mixed up. But
I also realized I'm wearing pants. I gotta fix that. Hang on.
Oh yeah, the No Pants Pat podcast. Oh, he's got to turn the camera off to do it.
I've let you all down. I've already got 2 strikes for exposing myself on YouTube.
Pat's really sticking to his morals here of not wearing pants on our show. Leave that to the imagination, though. We will appreciate it. Pat, anything to say about Darren Waller that hasn't really been said last week?
Yeah.
I mean, I was talking about what a great story he's been.
Yeah, that's really the thing that I'll remember about the guy, that he came from almost literal ruin. I believe he overdosed at one point, where like this guy was on a path to death, and he turned it around, and I'm sure he inspired a lot of people. And honestly, at the end of the day, that's going to be more important than football. I hope that he can, keep that together amidst his divorce with the ever popcorn eating Kelsey Plum. Yeah, and I guess like what it does for the Giants, nothing. Nothing. Like I was very low on him last year. And then the whole training camp thing popped up where it was like Daniel Jones is only throwing the ball to Darren Waller.
Yeah,
that
was like the training camp hype storyline.
One of the bigger.
There was, I mean, yes, people bought in, myself included, to Calvin Ridley and some of these other players, but like the Darren Waller Daniel Jones connection, I think was the one I heard the most about in camp, and it just did not materialize into anything relevant.
But yeah, and I never believed in it, and I honestly forgot that he was even that he was even on the roster this year. I mean, I guess the only thing, what Theo Johnson, he's the rookie out of where, Penn State, right? Yeah. Yep. And Daniel Bellinger is nothing special. He gets his eye popped out occasionally on the football field, but
brutal.
I mean, I don't foresee the tight end position having much of an impact at all from a fantasy perspective. Again, it's just another feather in Malik Neighbors' cap here. Just because while I did not love Waller's outlook, at the end of the day, he was going to get some targets. And those targets are going to need to go around. And Malik Neighbors is still pretty much head and shoulders above. Nobody else has the pedigree of Darren Waller. Granted, Darren Waller's old and lost a step, but nobody had that pedigree that Darren Waller had. So if it means anything, it just means something for Malik Neighbors to me.
Yeah, it becomes a question of how high is too high to draft Malik Neighbors, and I don't know if there's really an answer. Like, would it feel irresponsible to take him in the second round? A little. Do I think that?
Wait, the second round of like a fantasy draft, like a redraft?
Yeah, I'm saying, would that feel irresponsible? Yeah, 100%.
Oh, God.
Could I see it? But, Pat, you couldn't see him returning that value. There's no one else on this team. I'm not taking him in the second round.
That's just so scary. It's the Giants.
No, I know.
They have the same offense, the same coaching staff.
But not the same wide receiver one. They have one that might be actually worth a shit with his talent.
We saw them be pretty good 2 years ago under the same Brian Dable, Mike Kafka regime. So it's like, could they come back? But it's just like, there were weeks last year where they were like the hardest team to watch in football. Like they were miserable. So it's so hard for me to invest that amount into a Giant that early in that early second round. God, I thought you were talking like I didn't even know what you were talking about, because I'm like, surely he's not talking about like
no
top 24 overall.
Let me be clear. I will not be taking Malik Neighbors in the second round of our fantasy draft. I'm just saying, Pat, think ahead here to 2025 fantasy football drafts. Is it going to shock you if Malik Neighbors is a second round pick? It won't shock me if he plays to that level this year. And if he plays to that level this year, that means that was worth a pick this year. Grant, you can play ADP all the way you want. You're obviously, it is a little irresponsible to take a guy like that when he's ranked, I think, in the late 40s, mid 50s or something like that. So yeah, you probably don't need to take him.
I think that's a very fair ADP.
It is fair. There's plenty of risk there with, again, an uncertain quarterback, a quarterback who quite frankly could get benched at some point this year, and an offense overall that is just in shambles. But I'm just saying, I would not be surprised at all to see Malik Neighbors' name, inside the top 10 of wide receivers after this year in scoring. It's just, that's an upside play, and chasing strictly that upside is always dangerous, but it's certainly a possibility just with the lack of anything else this offense has.
Can I give the most obvious fantasy team name this year? Something to do with like Mr. Malik's neighborhood or something.
Mr. Rogers.
Like if you draft Aaron Rodgers and Malik Neighbors, Mr. Rogers' neighborhood, like that is going to be the, I might not draft Malik Neighbors just so I don't fall into that trap.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, it's almost.
I don't even know what my team name was last year. Oh, yes, I do.
The woke liberal bench mob.
The woke liberal bench mob.
Yeah. I don't remember.
I might have to keep that. I
don't remember mine because mine ended up being the Stroud Boys by the end of the year. We don't have to talk about that. We were basically
complete opposite of this.
Yeah, in terms of inspiration. All right, moving on a little bit. And the only other thing that I think Darren Waller retiring does, Pat, is opens the door, like you mentioned, for a dart throw tight end pick like a Theo Johnson. Realistically, it's probably Theo Johnson, right? Because I don't think Daniel Bellinger has shown enough to be like, yeah, let me invest in at best the second highest target receiver on the New York Giants. Theo Johnson is at least a long shot dart throw, as maybe this guy's actually pretty good. But even then, there might be better dart throws to take.
I don't see a Giants tight end being a top 24 tight end, even being a tight end too. So like, dynasty, maybe go for a guy like Theo Johnson because maybe it'll happen sooner than you think. But like,
sure, it just creates a name to keep
in
an
the
eye
position
on.
at all.
Yeah, just a name to keep in the back of your mind, more or less. Pat, real quick, the Vikings unveiled some new, completely white alternate uniforms. Just wanted to mention this because they're absolute heat, and the rest of the NFL uniforms that they have come out with this offseason have been mostly garbage or at least neutral. So shout out to the Vikings for actually creating some good uniforms. And Pat, on that note, I want to get your opinion on this because it's something I've been rambling about here and there. How do you feel about these MLB City Connect uniforms? Because I fucking hate almost all.
I think the concept is just very overdone. I think that like the fact that like, especially in the NBA where they try to like change it up every year, it's like get your City Connect concept and keep it. That's
at least
your
for
City
a few
Connect
years.
jersey.
Change it every 5 if you want. But
those hideous yellow and blue Red Sox jerseys are phenomenal. Those are phenomenal jerseys. Like, keep that, because then you start to build, like, those jerseys have an identity.
Right.
As the alternate. When you're changing stuff up and it's like, I don't even see the connection. I think I saw the Twins one today, and it was like
blue.
It was like
it looked like a Mariners jersey.
Like, I just don't get it. Like, I understand the concept of the City Connect jerseys, why they do it, but I think the concept is just really tired at this point, and there's only so many things you can do where you look at that and say, one, that makes sense, and two, that looks great. I feel like you're running out of ideas to pull that off.
Yeah, I've just said I'm sick of it essentially being an excuse to just use the complete opposite of a team's actual colors. Because, like, maybe that's like a boomer take, but, like, Pat, these teams have identified themselves with a certain colorway, and then you go, like, it's like you are going as far away as you possibly can just for the sake of making, like, a unique City Connect uni. I don't want to see the Twins in royal blue. Like, I don't care. The Red Sox ones are almost so crazy that they're good. I'll give you that the weird blue and yellow like that. Like, I'll see that. I'll see that and by now know that it's the Red Sox. But yeah, duck boat reference, whatever. That's driving me nuts too. It's the most like overthought thing ever because it's like, oh, this jersey's ugly and a weird color, and everyone's like, well, actually, it's a tribute to what they did in 1960. I don't fucking care about the minute details of why the Mets City Connect uniform actually has shapes from the New York City subway. Cool idea, 100%. Do it with your colors. Do it with your color. It doesn't need to be pink and gray. Like, it's just weird. It's just driving me nuts. So I just wanted to get that out there. Shout out to the Vikings for actually making a good alternate uniform. Thank you, guys. Pat, sticking in that division, the NFC North, the Detroit Lions were forced to forfeit their final OTA due to impermissible on-field contact. And this is just funny to me because it's so on brand for a Dan Campbell team, for his team to start fucking hitting each other before they're allowed to and getting penalized for it. So, look, this isn't a big deal. They're not going to get penalized any further. I just thought it was funny and wanted to mention it. And, Pat, in honor of that, I've decided to do a fun little segment here. An NFL Psychos draft in honor of Dan Campbell, Mr. Bite Your Kneecaps Off himself. I wanted to just give some shine to some of the craziest motherfuckers in the NFL history. And yes, it was. And for
because
clarity,
unfortunately,
this is not criminals. I'm not drafting Aaron Hernandez. Well, it might be criminals, but we're not drafting them because they're criminals. This is psychosis within the realm of football.
Yes.
We're not just drafting Hernandez because he murdered people or OJ.
Some of them have done or been accused of some very unfavorable things, but like making this list, like all I could think about was
murderers,
like Adam Pac-Man Jones and
every
guys
Cincinnati Bengal ever prior to 2016.
Oh God, and but I actually got a decent list, but I think I got like 15 or so names here, so like I feel pretty good about I was struggling at first, but I feel pretty good about what we got now.
All right. You have any idea who gets the first pick for this? It's still, guys. It's
God.
peek behind the curtain. It's the one thing we don't talk about before the
What
show.
did we do last time?
Was our last draft it wasn't the fantasy rookies, was it?
No, because we did the fucking Applebee's one, but there was another one. We did like
that
a 3. Oh, the bounce back one last week, and I think I had 101. I think I picked Kelsey.
Okay, we'll go with that.
Go ahead.
I'll take the first pick. All right, psychos in the NFL. Here we go. I actually don't know who I want my first pick to be. I have a group of guys.
I don't either.
So this is just kind of going to be flying by the seat of my pants. But I'm going to go with a guy. It was the first guy I thought of, Pat. And it's probably a terrible 101 because there's way more conventional, like crazy defensive players from like the 80s and the 70s and stuff. But I'm going to take Derek Wolfe. Denver Broncos defensive end. And do you want to know why I'm taking Derek Wolfe? Because
I did not think of him at all.
Because Derek Wolfe once looked at Phillip Rivers and told him, "I'm going to eat your kids." That was what
Neil
in the course. That's what he told him in the course of a game. He was so hyped up and so out of his mind. He told Phillip Rivers he was going to eat his kids. Oh, there was something weird, wasn't there? Yeah. I don't remember.
Oh, let's see what Wikipedia says.
I don't know that it was in his Wikipedia. Let's see. What if I just search Derek Wolfe drugs? Does it come up?
That might be it.
I'm taking mushrooms and Adderall before I play.
Oh, fuck yeah. We've all done that before.
I mean, yeah, 100%. Said it on the Joe Rogan Experience. What a surprise.
Of course he did.
To reveal that. Yeah, I'll take Derek Wolfe 101 strictly because he wants to eat Phillip Rivers' kids. And as you said, that's a lot of kids.
All right. You know how we just said no criminals?
Oh, okay, good. We're getting off.
This was the first name that popped into my head, and it is not because, well, technically, this man is an innocent man. This man committed no crime. Right. But how the fuck do you look at Ray Lewis and not say that this guy is a complete psycho? Yeah. The dance, the energy, the screaming, that guy was terrifying. That guy terrorized players. You know, potential double murder aside, I'm not talking about the double murder. I never brought up the double murder.
But what double murder?
But that guy is just like the quintessential head scratching player. Where you're just like, I'll have what he's having. Maybe it's mushrooms and Adderall.
It might be. They might be sharing meals before games. I wouldn't be surprised. All right, I'll dip into the more conventional guys that at least that some of the old heads will think of here when thinking of players. I'm going to take Jack Lambert, Pittsburgh Steelers.
He didn't take my guy, but he's on my list.
So Jack Lambert, I actually have a few notes on. First of all, he's mainly remembered for having his forefront teeth just missing and snarling at you like a wild dog. And the reason for that, Pat, was he got his teeth knocked out in a basketball game, I think in high school, and he has an insert to put in his mouth. He just chose not to wear it for games so he could look like more of a fucking psychopath. Note on him. Let's see. In Super Bowl X in the third quarter, Roy Gorella, who was the Steelers kicker, missed a field goal. Player on the other team, on the Cowboys, Cliff Harris, thought it would be smart to congratulate Gorella by slapping him on the helmet to kind of taunt him a little bit. Now, in today's NFL, that would be a taunting penalty. It wasn't back then. And so Lambert just grabbed him by the helmet and threw him to the ground and just said, no, that's not going to fucking happen. He's also just known for being one of the harder hitters ever, despite being, I believe, about 160 pounds, Pat, at middle linebacker.
Oh, God, if he was playing right now, he would be a kicker, maybe.
In fairness, he would, like, everyone was lighter.
Exactly,
so, like,
of course.
Being 160 pounds, even though he was, yes, lighter than all of his fellow linebackers by a significant amount, they were even only, 220-ish or so. So, yes, Jack Lambert, one of the faces of the old-timey Steelers defenses, and an ugly face at that, but certainly a certified psychopath. Big fan.
All right. I was worried you were going to take my guy. This guy was more of a late 80s, early 90s old head. If you're a fan of Adam Sandler movies, you might recognize him from movies like apparently The Benchwarmers, which got drafted in our sports draft.
Best sports movie of all time.
To the dismay of everybody, including me.
Best of all time. High School Musical, too.
This guy has been known, spitting on guys, kicking guys while they're down, and he punched a player so hard on his own team during practice that it dislodged his eye socket. Give me Bill Romanowski, the Roid Rage King himself.
Okay.
Raider legend.
Yeah, Bill Romanowski definitely had to be picked in this draft at some point. I'm glad you took him because I probably would have had to eventually. Yeah, these linebackers, Pat, some of these defensive guys just from back then, they're almost like mythical at this point because of how I want to say rightfully and wrongfully soft the game has become. I mean, there's definitely elements of it that are in the best interest of player safety, but then there's also pussy ass roughing the passer penalties that are just ridiculous.
Outside of the roughing the passer, I think most of it's good.
I think it is, the caveman in all of us is a little sad about the destruction of like truly big hits anymore and just nastiness that these guys brought, but at least we can look back at them and think, and appreciate it at the time. But yes, I'm definitely mostly in favor of, less brain damage. All right, next pick here. I want to go. I'm trying to gauge what you might do here, but
I don't know what I'm doing here, so
I'm going to go with another defensive Jack, and I'm going to take Jack Youngblood. Pat, Jack Youngblood played in the 1979 NFC Championship game and Super Bowl 14 with a broken leg. More importantly, he played in the Pro Bowl with a broken leg. People aren't playing in the Pro Bowl with a hangnail. Players won't go play dodgeball these days because they can't take the time out of their day. This motherfucker was playing in the Pro Bowl with a broken leg. Shout out Jack Youngblood.
All right. I was not expecting that. That did not help me. I was hoping maybe you were going to take one of my... So what, I got 3 more here, right? Yeah. Oh, man, there's so many good ones here. I'll tell you what, Brandon. I think I got a great pick here. Because if you put a sorry-ass drafter like Brandon in front of me, you know what's going to happen, baby. Give me Richard Sherman, man.
Richard Sherman, man.
That interview where Aaron Andrews genuinely looked afraid. That man was just losing his shit on fucking Michael Crabtree. Of all fucking people. And I've got another guy on this. Guy on this list whose most infamous run-in on the field was also with Michael Crabtree.
Oh, I know who that is then.
But just the guy, it's so crazy because he's such a cerebral player. He's such a brilliant guy, and he is so charismatic, and he was so good, and he's just so crazy out there. Again, we're not talking about what's happened in the last couple of years. We're talking about, we should do a criminals draft at some point, maybe. But somebody commits a really good crime, we will have to. Okay.
I'm taking Joseph Randall, who I believe stole underwear in 2011.
And got chased down by a fucking mall cop. Got as a running back and got shit rocked by it.
Joseph Randall 101.
Okay, yeah, but yeah. Richard Sherman, Control-Alt-Delete. I love this country, man.
All right. I think I'm going to go with the guy I have to get off this board. I don't think you're going to take him because it's kind of a different direction anyway, but it is the guy who is on the other end of your last pick crying, and it's Tom Brady. It's for different reasons. There's definitely not like...
Always got to shoehorn him into this, don't you?
Well, look... Tom Brady is not going to go out on the field and try to fight anyone. We know that.
Except when he's trying to trip Ed Reed and do a bunch of other really dirty shit.
In terms of being a fucking psychopath, I don't know that there's anyone crazier on this list. You don't get to the heights that Tom Brady has gotten without being a psycho. Like, we've seen it, and I think it's been like a little better documented with guys like Kobe and Michael Jordan, especially if you watch The Last Dance. Brady is cut from that exact same cloth, and you can't be this good, especially as a relatively unathletic 199th overall pick, if you don't have a fucking screw loose up top, or maybe some screws tightened a bit too tight. So I'm going with Tom Brady. I think it would be a shame if he went undrafted in a psycho.
I was not going to fucking draft him and his non-strawberry eating ass because it's too. Oh, whoops.
That's psychotic too, if you ask me.
That's what I mean. It's psychotic.
Strawberry, you weirdo.
I was not thinking that at all. Like, I could not have been thinking further from that. So, like, this is a tough pick here because this is essentially my last pick, and I'll explain why. I've got so many good guys on this list here. I'm not taking Chad Ochocinco because he was just kind of a loudmouth. Aqib Talib was the guy I was referring to.
I know.
With the chain snatching.
I don't know what Michael Crabtree did wrong to rub every corner the wrong way, but whatever.
You've got... I have Phillip Rivers on my list because that man is just a lunatic.
He's not a psycho. He just doesn't know what a condom is.
And he wears a bolo tie, and he I don't know what he's doing. Bart Scott, another great screaming interview guy. Can't wait. You got the legends. You got Lawrence Taylor. You got Mean Joe Green. Some more recent guys. J.J. Watt, James Harrison, Brian Cushing trying to decapitate himself with a helmet.
Brian Cushing, man. I just remember him for being hurt all the time. But yes.
I'm going to go with somebody here who I only learned of today. This man's name is John Henderson, a defensive tackle. Before every game, someone on the training team slaps that man in the face. And not just like a little, he gets whacked in the face, goes, whoa! Just like, look up John Henderson pregame ritual. The man just gets smacked before every game. Like, I mean, all fetishes aside here, John, what the hell are you doing? Like, that's crazy, man. That's crazy.
That's a little psychotic. All right. I like that you picked a player that I haven't heard of before. I may pick a player that you haven't heard of before, or at least that most of our viewers and listeners haven't heard of before. Pat, this guy played so long ago. He played for the St. Louis Cardinals in football. Yeah, I'm going to go with guard Conrad Dobler. First of all, A1 old guy football name. And if you Google this man and you see pictures of him, man. You see a picture of him in his old age. Sadly, he did die in February last year, but if you see him in his old age, he looks like a Conrad Dobler.
Rest in peace, Conrad. What the fuck?
Conrad Dobler. Here's the story on him. He had a quote that said, if I see defensive linemen jump to knock a pass down, when that happened near me, I'd smack them in the solar plexus, and they got their hand down real quick. I didn't know what a solar plexus was. I think it's hilarious that he had the scientific term on hand and didn't just say, I punched him in the stomach. He said, I punched him in the solar plexus, and they got their hands down real quick.
That's so hard, man.
And sports writer Paul Zimmerman was quoted as saying, Conrad Dobler was mean dirty. He tried to hurt people in a bad way. He made teams that he played on better, but he played hurt, didn't complain, but he was a filthy, filthy player. So I gotta go Conrad Dobler here to round it out.
All right. And the reason why I said I basically had one pick left, because you've got to have a coach on your team, right?
Oh, man.
You've got to have a coach. I thought about the infidelity committing, ass grabbing in an Ohio bar, kicker kicking Urban Meyer, but I didn't want to give him I didn't want to do that. You got Dennis Green. They're the Bears. They are who they thought they were. I'm going to go with a man that's near and dear to our heart. Because what I'm going to do with this draft, Brandon? Hello, you play to win the draft. Jim Mora Sr.
Yep.
And the thing, that wasn't even, well, obviously that was his most iconic one, but that man was a lunatic, especially when he was with the Saints at the end of his run, when he was just the media presence alone. Like, he doesn't have the Dan Campbell illegally putting players on the field or biting at kneecaps. This man just flew off the handle at any opportunity he could. And obviously now, speaking of UConn, his son Jim currently coaches UConn. So yay for Jim Mora Sr.
Shout out Jim Mora Jr. Thank you very much for attempting to lead UConn football to whatever
they got into a bowl game.
Yeah, not last year. Okay, that'll do it for our NFL Psychos draft. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Pat, let's move on to something that we've left more than 20 minutes for today, and that is
We're still going to be running out of time, man.
Probably. I'm way more prepared for this one, so we're definitely still going to run out of time. This is the AFC South Fantasy Football Preview.
Fulfill your fantasy.
See, I actually found this one a lot harder because, a lot of these guys I just did not have super strong opinions on. There were a few guys that I love that we will talk about in this division, but there were so many guys where I was just kind of like, or fair ADP, or just not really like them, don't really know why. So you're more prepared. I'm probably just going to be flying by the seat of my non-existent pants. So we will see what happens.
Notes. I got the research notes for you. This is our show.
I got some stuff here too. Don't worry.
Co-host, no, I say more prepared because I am slowly developing my full fantasy football rankings, complete with blurbs on basically every relevant player, because I'm doing it for my own research, and I figured, hey, two birds with one stone, let me just knock out the AFC South relevant players today, and then I'll know a little more what I'm talking about during the show, or at least be more well-researched. So, Pat, we'll start here with the Houston Texans, and this was where I started today with my write-ups, and it's C.J. Stroud, QB5, 56.8 ADP, and it bums me out because where I landed on C.J. Stroud, Pat, is he is massively overdrafted this year.
I agree. I really agree.
And look, this is coming from someone who the Texans quite literally saved my fantasy team from irrelevance last year. I needed to find a quarterback because Justin Fields was mid for the whole year. Got C.J. Stroud. Needed to find a flex that I could trust. Got Tank Dell. Needed a good, solid wide receiver too. I drafted Nico Collins, but he ended up being way better than I expected him to be. With all that said, you need to take yourself out of last season and the hype that C.J. Stroud, brought to both his own stock and the Texans and the NFL in general, and understand that I think that hype is sending his ADP a little bit higher than it needs to be. He doesn't have the rushing upside to be ranked as a top 5 quarterback.
Exactly.
And in fact, Pat, I ended up landing him at QB 10 for myself.
Okay, I'm a little higher on him than you. I've got him at 8.
I think that's fair. I mean, look, that's not much higher. I don't see it with him. And the notes I have on him are, look, Stroud was QB7 in points per game last year if you exclude the partial seasons from Joe Flacco and Kirk Cousins. If you want to include them, he was QB9 in points per game. And either way, he averaged 18.4 points per game, which was only 0.1 higher than Kyler Murray, 0.2 higher than Anthony Richardson, and 0.9 higher than Patrick Mahomes. I expect all 3 of those guys to jump at least by that much this year, just by virtue of Kyler and Richardson, as of right now, aren't injured, and Patrick Mahomes is going to have a much better offense than what he had last year. So I struggle to draft a guy who is essentially just a pocket passer. He can move a little bit. I mean, he'll move a little bit, but it's not really anything notable. I think he's got about as safe of a floor as you can get for a fantasy quarterback with, the Texans have arguably the best receiving core in the NFL now, bringing in Stephon Diggs. So he's got the weapons to throw to. He's going to be solid, but this is a guy that, I think there's going to be more, 16, 17-point fantasy performances than you really want out of a guy you're drafting as QB5.
Yeah, and even talking about the pocket passers, if we're talking that second tier pocket passers, I like Joe Burrow a good deal better than I like C.J. Stroud this year. And like you said, we'll talk about Anthony Richardson, but I think the rushing gives him way more upside. And you mentioned Kyler too. I didn't put Kyler ahead of him. The other guy I put ahead of him was fucking Dak Prescott. But excuse me. But
I've got Dak above him too.
But yeah, he was fantastic last year. He was so good, so unexpected. I think people kind of figured he would have a Bryce Young-esque year where it's yeah, he's getting there. But he was fantastic, and he's going to be fantastic. But it's just that kind of second tier. If I'm going to get a pocket passer, I'd rather have Patrick Mahomes. Well, I guess I don't even know what the fuck you call it. You call him Patrick Mahomes, honestly. I'm not nuts about that kind of tier of quarterbacks anyway. I feel if you hadn't taken a quarterback by then, you're going to wait longer. Especially in a year where it's a very deep position. When I'm looking at my own personal rankings here, and I've got 15 or 16 guys that I legitimately think have a shot to be one of the top 12 QBs here at the end of the year.
I agree.
So just with that, I just have very little interest in him in redraft leagues, especially where he's going. What round is that? 56? That's this 5th round. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
No way.
And
no
that's the
way.
thing, Pat. You mentioned, how good he was and what a revelation he was last year. It's that's the sentiment when in reality for fantasy, it wasn't that good. If you know what I'm saying. Yes, you got that guy off of waivers and that feels awesome. I don't see what he did last year and understand projecting him to finish 2 spots higher this year as QB5 when part of the reason he finished QB7 last year was because so many of these guys were hurt. Burrow's out of the equation. Anthony Richardson's out of the equation. Anthony Richardson
Herbert
in a
missed
17-game season, I would bet my house on scoring more fantasy points than C.J. Stroud.
I agree.
You have all these guys that were super banged up, and still, even with all those guys banged up last year, he still only finished as QB7, which, yes, for last year is great, but for drafting him as QB5 this year, is not so great. So I just don't see the value with him. If he were to slip in a draft, absolutely, because I still love him as a player. I think he's still going to perform very well from a real life perspective. And I still think he's going to finish as a top 10 fantasy quarterback at least. But I just don't see the kind of upside that has me drafting him that early. The guys I have above him, Pat, other than the obvious, are Joe Burrow, Dak Prescott, Kyler Murray, and I could go either way on this one. But as of right now, I have Jaden Daniels above him as well, strictly because of the rushing. So
see, I've got Jaden Daniels kind of poking around that area, but I was more so thinking even like a Jordan Love could potentially kind of be at least in that tier.
I have Love right behind Stroud. I think they belong together. They're very similar players.
If you could get a Love or Jaden Daniels, or God, even to kind of go down here, even a guy like Herbert's going is crazy, or Tua, or you could wait so much longer. Brock Purdy, for God's sake, like you can wait on these guys here. And in the 5th round, if I'm going to take a quarterback early, I'm going to take one of those big 4 or Anthony Richardson. Or like I am not, I'm not gonna. I love Joe Burrow. Maybe I'd pick Joe Burrow, but just like Stroud there just does not sit well with me. Just almost from a relative perspective, because I just think there is so much better value out there than where he's going.
100% agree. Pat, moving into their backfield, we've got Joe Mixon joining the Houston Texans. RB15, 60.5 ADP on Underdog. This is one where I feel like that's a good spot for him. I think there's decent value to be had there. Now, Mixon's story is at least expected to be, and what has been in Cincinnati the last few years, high volume, low efficiency. He's not exactly the most explosive back anymore, but he's going to get the touches, and the Texans didn't make him the 6th highest paid running back in the league to not use him. So I say, look, efficiency be damned. It's not going to be the most exciting way to get there, but I do think as RB, what is it? RB15, 60.5 ADP on Underdog. Like, that is more than likely to return value, in my opinion, just from a usage standpoint and a scoring touchdown standpoint.
Yeah, I agree. I've never been a huge Joe Mixon guy in general. I thought he was kind of not exclusively built on opportunity, but the opportunity helped a lot, and it was always kind of like, what would he do in another setting? But I feel like he's entering a setting that's going to be very, very similar to what it was like in Cincinnati. With this pocket passing quarterback who's not going to take much from you on the ground, just like he had with Joe Burrow, and a great receiving core, just like he had, with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd. Like, it's just a very similar setting here, and I think we both expect this team to be really good again. And if that's the case, these opportunities are going to be crazy. Yeah, I think 15 is fair. Like, I'm not overjoyed to take Joe Burrow. Like, I kind of just did a quick glance, and I'd probably have him between like 15 to 17. Not super enthusiastic about it. What round is that in? It's what I'm,
It's very beginning of the 6th round, technically. If
so,
you
like,
are looking at
that's dead zone. That's dead zone material. And in the dead zone, I like that. I like that just because you are not going to get a bell cow. Like, he's basically a bell cow. Like, Dameon Pierce is dust. Like, he was bad to the point last year where they were giving Devin Singletary 20-plus touches. He got 30 touches in a game, Devin Singletary. That's how little they believed in Dameon Pierce. And Devin Singletary did well with that opportunity. And Joe Mixon's a much better running back than Devin Singletary. So, while he's not going to get that amount of touches, just the floor he has and the touches he's going to get, he may not go blow you away except the one game that he's going to score 5 touchdowns because he's fucking Joe Mixon. But, like, solid floor in where he's going, in the dead zone, you're going to see guys that do not have anywhere close to that opportunity. So, give me Joe Mixon there.
Just not exciting, but it doesn't have to be. This is a case where, as Matthew Berry always preaches, Pat, it's talent and opportunity. This is a case where excessive amounts of opportunity can compensate for what might be some dwindling talent, but he's still talented enough.
He's still solid, but it's just the opportunity. Had he gone to, like, oh God, I don't know. Or he gone somewhere where there was another guy in the picture more so. Like a place like Tennessee or something like that, I would be very out on a guy like Joe Mixon, but just the opportunity for him to be essentially a bell cow in such a, strong offense, good enough. That's good enough.
I would agree. Moving on to our favorite position group, Pat, in fantasy football.
Dude.
The Houston Texans wide receivers, the great puzzle of our time right now. We've got Nico Collins, wide receiver 14, 20.0 ADP. Stephon Diggs, wide receiver 20, 28.1 ADP. And Tank Dell, wide receiver 26, 37.3 ADP. Now, I want to preface this by saying these ADPs are pretty different, Pat, from what Fantasy Pros has as rankings right now. I think the ADP may still be adjusting for Nico Collins because, as we know, those psychopaths over on Underdog have been drafting literally since last season ended. And at that point, Stephon Diggs had not been traded to the Texans, and I'm sure Nico was a much more desirable player. Nico, as of right now, is number 32 overall on Fantasy Pros consensus rankings and is wide receiver 18. I think that is a much more appropriate spot for him because I think you and I both agree, wide receiver 14, 20 ADP, we're out. Like, I could not be more out at that price.
No way.
That is a hard no, taking him middle of the second round after they've already acquired Stephon Diggs and have Tank Dell. I'm all set. But this area of being kind of mid to late third round, yeah, I'm good with that. To break down these receivers, Pat, this is kind of where I've landed after thinking about it. And Stephon Diggs is going to eat into both Nico Collins and Tank Dell's target shares, obviously. That's just how it goes. But from a prioritization standpoint, I do think Nico is my favorite of the three. I don't know that I'll want to pay the price for him, but I think I've just soured a little bit on the idea of what will at some point this season be 31-year-old Stephon Diggs coming off of his worst season. I know the Texans made a concerted effort to trade for him. I think he's going to be a really good real-life asset, but I find it hard to believe, not only in the possibility that he outproduces Nico Collins, but that he, I don't want to go too far, but even gets that close to Nico Collins. I feel like this is just rich get richer from a real life standpoint than, yes, it's going to hurt Nico. Yes, it's going to hurt Tank. I still think Nico is going to, especially at, again, that mid to late third round area, produce more than well enough for you as a wide receiver too, if you're drafting him that way.
Yeah, like the ADP, no way. And to be honest, like, am I going to draft much of any of these three? No, probably not.
Too.
And it's really unfortunate just because you don't know. I mean, Diggs' fall off was drastic. Like, the first 8 games, he was elite. Like, there was one point I had him and Tyreek Hill, and they were 1-3 last year, and it was like, oh, I'm living life. And then he just vanished as soon as Joe Brady came in, and it's like, was that a case of Joe Brady's kind of changing a game plan, or is it, what's gonna come now with Stephon Diggs possibly starting a decline in his career? Where I think Tank Dell, I've kind of said before, if I've got to have one of these guys, it's Tank Dell. And I just think the big thing is he did not get a lot of opportunity last year. Like, he only had a 20% target share on this, on this team with not a ton of, Nico Collins, Dalton Schultz, Noah Brown, like not a ton of these earth beaters. But man, the big play factor is so there for him, more so than Collins and Diggs. Unfortunately, though, with Diggs there, I don't think we're going to see that target share, that opportunity share rise enough for Dell, where I'm cool with taking him in the early 4th round with that much competition around. That's going to be a really high-volume offense, but the question is just going to be, who's going to get it? And if you're not drafting multiple of these guys. So, like, you draft Nico Collins, say, and you whiff. If Nico Collins isn't the guy, you're not going to be happy. I as much as I like Nico Collins and Tank Dell, before Diggs came in, I loved them both. But Diggs just throws such a wrench into him because, like, we don't know for sure if it's kind of just like a downturn thing. It could very well have been Joe Brady that kind of iced his production. So I am unfortunately probably just going to stay away altogether. And try to go for, receivers that I think are going to be more consistently involved enough to where they're producing on 3rd and 4th round levels.
Yeah, Tank Dell's another one that I think that ADP on Underdog has kind of yet to respond to the trade, at least fully. Again, Fantasy Pros consensus rankings has Tank Dell as their 56th overall player, which would allow you to get him in sort of the middle of the 5th round. I'm good with that. I'm good with Tank Dell as my flex, regardless of playing time concerns. Is it ideal to have a guy who is probably going to play 60 to 70% of snaps on a weekly basis versus 80 to 90? No, it's not. But is it worth it to have a guy playing 70% of snaps, but with the talent level that he has versus a guy playing 90% who stinks? It might be. Yeah. Pat, I went through a few of the Texans games last year where just to gauge, kind of how the distribution goes between three receivers when they are trying to utilize. Because if you remember, Noah Brown had a stretch where he was very relevant last year.
I was playing Noah Brown in the league, and he was helping me win games.
Both while guys were hurt and while they were healthy. And there were games, Pat, where, the worst of the three, whoever was the bottom feeder that week, and it did rotate. It wasn't always Noah Brown just because he is objectively the least talented of the three. It would be maybe Nico Collins, who had 3 catches for 40 yards and a touchdown, or, that kind of stat line. That floor, granted you take the touchdown away and it's not good, you can stomach that in the flex, I think. You can deal with that.
It's not really going to tank you.
If that's your floor with a guy like Tank Dell, whose ceiling is, those 11 catch, 180 two touchdown games, like I'm good with that. So Tank Dell at cost, perfectly fine with. Nico Collins at cost, tentative, but maybe. Stephon Diggs, honestly, Pat, take everything else away. He's going to be 31 this year. You know how I feel about old guys. I'm good. I don't want him.
People, yeah.
I don't want him. I go back.
Benchwarmer Bran hates the olds.
Go back to the retirement home where you belong. Okay, so that's the Texans wide receivers. Dalton Schultz, Pat, tight end 13. This is another one this must have not responded yet to the Diggs trade because tight end 13 is way too rich given all the receivers they have here now. 127.8 ADP on Underdog. I am good there.
I've got him at tight end 17 on my own rankings here.
Yeah, Dalton Schultz is just not a guy I'm really going to be thinking about with all the receivers that they have. I'm sure he'll have a couple games. Obviously, everyone does if you're a starter, but I'm not going to try to.
He'll be one of the guys that you see every week in the waiver wire articles and the top guys on the way. If you're streaming tight end, I'm sure you'll play him a little bit, but just not ideal. Again, no Stephon Diggs. I'm feeling a bit better about Dalton Schultz, even as the third option at tight end 13. That's still a fine value, but I'm seeing other guys in this area like Cole Kmet, Dallas Goedert, Luke Musgrave, Brock Bowers, guys that I would much rather have than Dalton Schultz.
I agree. And if we listen to our boy Coupe Fiasco on Twitter, the tight end guru himself, you're pretty much a moron if you don't draft a tight end who at least has a chance of becoming a top 2 target on his team. Dalton Schultz has 0 chance of that happening this year.
He's fighting for top 3, man.
He's fighting for top 4 at this point. He may produce despite that, but it's not a good bet. There's much better bets you can place. The Indianapolis Colts, Pat, Anthony Richardson. I don't think I could feel any more opposite about a quarterback from C.J. Stroud than I do with Anthony Richardson. Currently on Underdog, QB6, 56.9 ADP. Ironically, that's that is 0.1 behind Stroud, so he's catching up there as well.
He'll pass him.
Anthony Richardson, I think we haven't talked about the NFC, but I definitely mentioned this with Bijan before. Anthony Richardson could also break fantasy football. And I think that's well within his range of outcomes. The main concern with him is the shoulder injury that a lot of people are worried about. Yeah. Granted, the shoulder is sore right now. He's dealing with some soreness, but overall, this is not an injury that is expected to linger. He's expected to be full go once the season starts. Look, if it's still sore in August, we can have a talk, but even the Colts are saying we're surprised it hasn't been more sore up to this point. That's how smooth the recovery has been for Richardson. And this injury, this is one of those injuries, Pat, that is more fluky than predictive of anything else in the future. And we do this every year. We do it with different players every single year where a guy gets hurt the season prior, especially as a rookie where they've built up no goodwill of staying healthy. But this happens all the time. Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, Breece Hall, they get hurt. You say, that guy's injury prone. I'm not going to touch him. And then guess what? They're probably dropping 40 against you because you were too scared to draft him. We need to understand, just a reminder again, not all injuries are created equal. This is not an injury like a torn Achilles for a running back. That's generally a death sentence for their explosiveness. This is not an in-season high ankle sprain or hamstring injury that you do genuinely need to worry about because there's no time to fully recover from it. This is a shoulder injury that he suffered in week 5 of last season, got surgery to repair, and is expected to be completely fine. Anthony Richardson, in the limited playing time he had, showed he could be one of the most dominant players in fantasy football, and in a Shane Steichen offense with this offensive line, to the fucking
Stealing all my
moon
talking
for
points.
Anthony Richardson. To the moon.
Yeah. Like you look at him last year, like obviously he got banged up in a couple games, one to the point where he was done. But in the other two, 11 for 25, 200 yards, 2 touchdowns to go with 10 for 56 and a touchdown on the ground, as well as against the Jaguars, they lost this game. 24 for 37 for 223, a touchdown, a pick, 10 for 40 and a touchdown on the ground. In one of the games where he was dinged up, where he only attempted 10 passes against the Colts, he counteracts that with 35 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground.
Yeah.
Like, the rushing quarterback, like, I feel like we're gonna, as we get more and more of these guys, because it was, such a treat to have, a running quarterback. But now you've got Lamar Jackson, you've got Jalen Hurts, you've got Anthony Richardson, Jaden Daniels should fit this mold. We've got Kyler Murray is still kind of lingering as a running quarterback. That rushing floor is huge, but we've seen that this guy's got a big arm. The whole thing with him coming into it is that he's going to be a project. And we've seen with project quarterbacks, if it hits, good luck. They said that about Patrick Mahomes. I'm not trying to compare Anthony Richardson to Patrick Mahomes, but like, I feel like he's going to be much closer to Patrick Mahomes than a guy like who's a project that failed. I don't know, a project that failed. Jake
Justin
Locker.
Fields.
Not yet, but he's going to be closer to Patrick Mahomes than Justin Fields by a lot there. And that offense was really good with Gardner Minshew under center last year. That offense was really good, and I think they're going to be really good again. And I am all aboard on Anthony Richardson. I mean, when we do our pals, or Brand's boys, Pat's pals, we might have a bit of a tussle over this guy.
I have Anthony Richardson. It's possible.
I have a feeling we're gonna have to fight to the death, literally, on here. But yeah, I think this Colts offense is gonna be really good again, and he's at the epicenter, which is interesting because, like, how do you love a guy and say that he's a running quarterback, running, and yet I fucking love Jonathan Taylor.
I do too. I've been fighting with that as well.
Jonathan Taylor. The guy was so good when they finally took the training wheels off and told Zach Moss to hit the buffet. He's not even a fat guy. I don't even know why I was associating with that.
He profiles like one. It feels like
when they let Jonathan Taylor go, he was fantastic. Obviously, no Anthony Richardson. We didn't get to see what they were like sharing a backfield together.
Yep.
But I think, again, with the way this offense is going to go, I think that, with the two guys running the ball they have, I think they're going to be very run heavy. And the biggest thing about Jonathan Taylor to me, no competition. We're talking Evan Hull. We're talking Trey Sermon. You are not worried at all about any of these guys. This guy is going to be a bell cow of all bell cows in terms of running backs. The only thing is just the Anthony Richardson, but that's still good enough for me to say that he's going to be a bell cow in a great offense behind a great offensive line that you mentioned. I love Jonathan Taylor. And I can't explain it, but I love them both. I think they're both going to pop the fuck off.
I completely agree. My issue is going to be making sure I don't draft them to the same team, because while I do think they can both independently succeed, I think I'd be asking for trouble if I drafted them to like the same team in our league, or maybe I'd have a great time. Who knows? Yeah, Jonathan Taylor. If your only red flag is that your QB is going to steal some touchdowns from you sometimes, I'm okay with that.
Does that ADP say 16.1?
On Underdog, yeah. It's Underdog, dude, they're obsessed with receivers. I don't know what's wrong with that.
Oh, well, yeah, the PPR, like,
he's going to go,
and he's
like,
going to catch the ball, too. He
Yeah.
can catch the ball on the backfield, too. Like, we're talking about the guy that, 3 years ago was the overall RB1? He went first. He was going first in drafts 2 years ago. Like, this is a guy who could be the most talented, at his peak, could be the most talented running back in the whole league. Even with the wide receiver fetish here. I love Jonathan Taylor. Like, I'm not, saying that this is going to happen, but if we're talking at the end of the year and Jonathan Taylor was the RB1, I would not be surprised. I really would not be surprised.
No, not at all. Yeah, I don't know why he's going so late there. I think people are truly just scared off that much by the running ability of Anthony Richardson. And I'm just like, there are so many backs with bigger concerns than that. The guy that's going to be playing with a great O-line, a great offensive mind in Shane Steichen, and has no competition. Yeah, sign me up for that all fucking day. I'm very much excited to take him potentially with the 8th overall pick in our draft, Pat. We'll see if I end up going that direction or not.
If you can get him.
You can't take him and Bijan it too. You're just not allowed to.
And CeeDee Lamb.
Okay. Moving to the receivers here, Pat. We've got Michael Pittman Jr., wide receiver 24, 33.1 ADP. Adonai Mitchell, wide receiver 57, 116.9 ADP. And Josh Downs, wide receiver 62, 130.7 ADP. And hey, let's just throw in the tight end. Jelani Woods, tight end 29, 210.4 ADP. Pat, you want to know a fun fact about Michael Pittman? And this was something I did.
His father also played in the NFL?
Not the basic fact, no. This was as part of research I did for us, our league, because we are transitioning from non-PPR to half PPR. Michael Pittman Jr. had the biggest difference in positional finish from standard to PPR. Like the only one, Pat, that really moved more than like 3 or 4 spots. For the most part, everyone in their own position group stayed pretty close together. Michael Pittman Jr. in non-PPR was wide receiver 27. In half PPR, wide receiver 19. Jumped up 8 spots with the benefit of just half PPR. I thought that was crazy. And that made me way more interested in him. And the reason I did all that research and that exercise was because I wanted to make sure that my own perception of players was not falsely skewed from our previous settings. And I wanted to make sure oh, no, if we played in a half PPR league, I probably would be feeling a lot different about Michael Pittman Jr. at this point. I would have been like, oh, he had a good season instead of, I feel like he wasn't very good or very startable, which was the case in non-PPR. But in half PPR, he was a mid-tier wide receiver too. And now playing with Anthony Richardson, I mean, the offense is going to be better. I'm very much in. We didn't get to see him play much with Anthony Richardson. We saw a couple of games, and they were a very mixed bag. I believe it was 8 catches, 97 yards, and 1 touchdown in the first game, and then 1 catch, 15 yards, and 0 touchdowns in the other game. So dicey there, but I think over the course of a season in a much better offense with Anthony Richardson, I'm very interested considering he's the only proven target on this team.
That's what I was about to say. A.D. Mitchell kind of seems like one of these more hot and cold project guys that we may not see consistently incorporated. And Josh Downs was actually pretty solid last year. I had Josh Downs on a few teams, and he was solid, but nothing spectacular. And then the tight end position. Is Mo Alley-Cox still there? Mo Alley-Cox.
Probably.
I'm sure he'll have a 2-touchdown game at some point. Yeah, he is still there. But they have really nothing consistent at the tight end position, and then just unproven guys at the wide receiver spot. And again, granted, they're going to run the ball a lot. But at the end of the day, there's still a quarterback in Anthony Richardson that we believe can get the job done in the passing game. And he is far and away the number 1 target there. So I guess this has just turned into a Colts glazing just because I'm in on Richardson, I'm in on Taylor, and I am in on Michael Pittman.
I'm even in on Jelani Woods as a dart throw because I want to know why
I was a couple of years ago
because of what I mentioned before about a guy that needs the path to be a top 2 target that exists on this team. It's probably A.D. Mitchell. That's why they drafted him there. But if Jelani Woods turns out to be this athletic freak, I mean, at least he might, score enough touchdowns in a good offense to be on radars. I'm not drafting him. I'm probably not drafting him. We'll put it that way. But it's a guy that I'm certainly keeping my eye on as on a team that there are, targets up for grabs and playing time up for grabs here, at least in some spots. Okay, the Tennessee Titans, Pat. The other teams we mentioned for the most part, really don't have much turnover. I mean, they have some guys who are hurt coming in. They have some, additions like Stephon Diggs, but this is the one that they basically undid everything. New head coach Brian Callahan, who, by the way, has never called plays before. New offensive coordinator Nick Holtz. He was the Jaguars passing game coordinator last year with Calvin Ridley, who they brought in. Previously, he was the UNLV offensive coordinator in 2022, and then he was with the Raiders for 10 years. The biggest wild card here to me, Pat, just overarching for the Titans, is their offensive line, because they had one of the worst offensive lines in football last year, which, as we know, throws off everything, throws off the timing, throws off productivity of just everything you're trying to do. Not only did they sign Lloyd Cushenberry and draft J.C. Latham to be their new left tackle, they brought in Bill Callahan, notoriously
the offensive
good
line guru
offensive
for
line
the last
coach
20 years.
from Cleveland. So look, there is a massively wide range of outcomes for this team. And so that's what makes kind of evaluating each position a little tough, because it really could go either way. I guess we'll start with Will Levis though, Pat. QB 24, 180.9 ADP. Maybe the best dart throw quarterback you can make, but
I
not
think
a
so.
guy obviously that you're relying on.
Yeah, I mean, if you're in a 2 QB or Superflex league, yeah, I think Will Levis is a guy that can certainly be viable on a week-to-week basis. We've seen the guy has a huge arm. Similar to Anthony Richardson, he was a project. And I just think that team was so mundane with Mike Vrabel and Tim Kelly calling plays on offense. It was just such a boring slog of a game. Obviously, Derrick Henry's Derrick Henry, but besides that, DeAndre Hopkins had a decent year. We'll talk about him. But, I feel like Brian Callahan, if anything, is going to inject some life. He didn't call plays for Cincinnati, but he was still there. He was still, leading that offense. And I feel like he's going to inject a lot of life. I feel like he was a great signing because for the coach, if somebody is going to develop Will Levis, I think he's an excellent candidate to do that. Will Levis could be a complete gunslinger. He's got a really high ceiling. Do I think he quite reaches that? No, I don't. And again, especially with how deep the QB position is in a 1 QB league, I'm not really even going to be thinking about Will Levis in a standard 12 team, your typical 12 team, non-super flex league. But I do think, I think I'm a bit higher on Will Levis than the average bear here. I think that he's got a shot here. Maybe not this year, but I believe in Will Levis long term. This year, I don't know.
I'm a little higher than consensus on him as well. In my own rankings, I have him as QB 19. And I put him above guys like Jared Goff and Matthew Stafford and Tua. I fucking hate Tua. Because we know what those guys are at this point, and we know that they are streamer quarterbacks. If they're facing a terrible defense, you can start him. Jared Goff specifically, if he's at home, you can start him. But they also are... They're like guys who are going to hover around 16, 15 points a game most weeks. Levis is a guy that could take that step forward. That's why I feel like Levis is a good guy to pair, if you are going to draft him, with a guy like Brock Purdy or Kirk Cousins, if you're going to do that. Because those are the guys that, their floor is a little bit higher. I think they are guys that'll hover around 18, 19, 20 a lot of weeks. But Levis is a guy that if everything breaks right, I mean, he could be long shot possibility one of the better quarterbacks in fantasy with the weapons that he has and just the complete retooling of that team and the raw talent that we think we know he at least has in his arm. Does he have it in terms of mental processing then to put it all together? I don't know. But I think that's a decent gamble to make, at least to pair him with one of those less exciting sort of quarterbacks. So I'm curious to see what he does this year. He's going to be the engine that either makes this offense go or not go. I guess that really starts with the offensive line, but it also goes with Will Levis. Can he actually do things if he is given time?
Madison, Connecticut.
Will he even be given time? We don't know. Pat, the run game we can plow through real quick because we've talked about Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears at length.
Why? Why did they have to get Tony Pollard?
Tony Pollard, RB29, 98.8 ADP. Tyjae Spears, RB34, 113.4 ADP. We're both more in on Tyjae Spears than we are Tony Pollard because we both believe Tyjae Spears is simply the better player at this point.
This is going to
be at least more explosive than Tony Pollard.
This is going to be a really good real-life backfield, I think. I think that having that kind of two, those dynamics are going to be really good for that offense. But fantasy, I can't do it. I just can't do it with either of these guys. Even in a year where there are a lot of muddy backfields, and as long as these two guys stay healthy, I don't really see a guy really extending himself. And again, you take a guy and you whiff. That's a spot that you need. That's a spot that you need. When you draft here, you need somebody who's going to be a starter. So I personally can't do it. I love Tony Pollard. I have him in my Dynasty League, which is devastating. And I love Tyjae Spears. But together, I cannot get behind it.
And there's also the possibility and likelihood, Pat, that this team's going to be a lot more pass heavy than they were last year. I mean, that was kind of the point of bringing in Brian Callahan, who was with the Burrow, Chase, Higgins, Bengals. It's because they wanted to get a little bit away from the run, pass identity that Mike Vrabel instilled with them. Granted, they were probably going to do that anyway with Derrick Henry leaving, but it is still worth noting that this team's not going to run as much as they did last year. Yeah. So, you also have a potentially smaller pie than people are realizing that is being split between these two backs. I could see Tyjae Spears ending up on some of my teams. But yeah, as long as both these guys
more
are
likely than Tony Pollard.
Yeah, more likely than Pollard. And as long as both these guys are healthy, yeah, I don't really see like the bull case for either guy. Moving to the receiving group, Pat, Calvin Ridley, wide receiver 36, 61.5 ADP. DeAndre Hopkins, wide receiver 42, 72.6 ADP. And Tyler Boyd, wide receiver 86, 203.7 ADP.
Hey,
Tyler
Brian
Boyd,
Callahan guy.
get your ass out of here. And then our boy Chigakonkwo is tight end 25, 191.6 ADP. So, part of my research today, Pat, was Calvin Ridley.
Gross.
Calvin Ridley is a guy who notoriously burned me last year, and I do not know if I'm going to declare myself in on him again. Certainly not as in as I was last year, but here were some of the notes I got on Ridley. First of all, it's what everybody knows, which is he got $46.9 million guaranteed in that $92 million contract over 4 years. So they have plans for him. Whether he can deliver on those or not, we'll see. But
And that was a last minute thing too. Like, what was it, New England or Jacksonville? So they must have said, "Hey, come here, be the feature of our offense. We're going to pay you a fuck ton of money to do it." That means something.
A lot. It says a lot when it's a new coaching staff coming in too.
Absolutely.
That's the move that they say, "Hey, we want to make. We want to bring this guy in." Callahan's already said he wants to use him in as like sort of a Jamar Chase role, the way he used him in Cincinnati. People are going to hear that and say, "What the fuck? He's not Jamar."
Yeah,
Chase.
that was my first thought. Was what the fuck?
Obviously, I don't think he means we're going to get Jamar Chase productivity. If we did, Jesus Christ. But just sort of in a way that he is their primary target. He moves him around the field a lot. And honestly, Pat, the comparison's even more apt because DeAndre Hopkins being this offense's T. Higgins makes a lot of sense. Like a guy who's going to emerge as a wide receiver one or as his team's wide receiver one occasionally, but overall is the understudy to the younger, at this point, maybe more talented guy. Granted, Calvin Ridley's not young. Actually, hold that thought. Is Calvin Ridley even younger than DeAndre Hopkins? I actually don't know that for a fact. I think he is. But he is by 2 years. Okay, Hopkins is 32, Ridley's 30. So more or less forget the age thing. But either way, if he is planning to use Ridley like Jamar Chase, that is going to be a big change from how he was used in Jacksonville, because he was used mainly on these deep routes that I remember agonizingly and painstakingly watching not get completed, seeing all these fantasy points
duck down the field,
seeing all these points get left on the table. But if he's using him more like kind of all over the field, these short intermediate routes, I mean, Pat, that's really interesting. And not only is that interesting in that sense, it's also, look, he was wide receiver 17 last year. So on the whole, that sounds pretty good. The issue was his inconsistency. Absolutely. If he's used in this way, even if he's just wide receiver 17 again, but he's more consistent. I think my camera's about to die. I'm not sure.
Yeah, Pat Show. All right.
Even if he's more
Mute
consistent,
yourself. Welcome.
Even if he's just more consistent and finishes wide receiver 17 again, it will feel like he returned value more so this year than last year. So I may be back in on Calvin Ridley. I'm not really sure.
I just don't know how to feel. Like, it's so bizarre because I think that Will Levis is going to be solid and can at least help maintain an offense here, but I just don't love either of these guys. You know, Hopkins had a decent year last year, but again, who was like Treylon Burks? Like who else is even vying for catches there?
Dust.
That's the thing is like I feel like
I don't know.
Nick Westbrook Akina, there was not much there, so that's why I think Hopkins did as well as he did. I'm not enthusiastic about Hopkins at all. I'm probably just kind of out on Hopkins. You know, I feel like he's kind of one of those guys that falls a lot. You know, I love picking the fallers.
You do.
So you know, I could see myself taking a guy like him if he falls a couple rounds, but I'm not enthusiastic about either of these guys. But I do think Ridley is probably going to be the focal point. And like you said, I think consistency is going to be the key here because he was so frustrating last year, as was most of the Jaguars, not named Travis Etienne. He was really frustrating last year. And yeah, and I need to salute our boy Chigakonkwo. My first ever sus joke on this podcast was that I would say, like, I'm touching him, or I said, like, something like that, and then I said I wanted to dominate me, I think. So he is useless from a fantasy perspective. Sadly. He's a guy that I think everyone wants to be something. He is not on my radar on the slightest. Godspeed.
Yeah, unfortunately, the Titans unexpectedly ending up with two pretty high-end, albeit a little older wide receivers. Yeah, that's definitely cooked the tight end from a fantasy perspective, considering we don't even know if the quarterback is going to let this offense function, or the O-line or anything. So, that's just betting a little too far down the tree, if you ask me. All right, finishing out here with the Jacksonville Jaguars, Pat. Our boy Trevor Lawrence, again, we've said it a million times. We're just kind of waiting for him to take the leap, and he has just refused.
Take the gallop.
It's unfortunate because maybe this is just who Trevor Lawrence is. Like, he's just one of those guys in that like Jared Goff, Kirk Cousins tier where he's like pretty good, and you're not upset that he's your quarterback, but he's not going to take that step forward and be Joe Burrow like we thought he would be coming out of college. And I think, Pat, the only real case and only thing to hang your hat on for hoping he makes the leap this year is that Calvin Ridley was just a horrible fit in this offense, because even before Calvin Ridley got here, he was still just QB 8, 9, like kind of back end, where he was again.
Yeah, I think he went like QB 9, 10 in our league last year.
It's like I don't know where you're supposed to find the optimism that like, okay, Ridley's gone, sure, maybe he was a bad fit. We're kind of just back to where we were 2 years ago now. Like, yeah, they brought in Gabe Davis and drafted Brian Thomas Jr., but is that really going to be that much different than 2 years ago where, Christian Kirk and Evan Engram were already here, Travis Etienne was already here, and yeah, you've added some different like ancillary weapons, but I don't see that being the difference between Trevor Lawrence, finally becoming the quarterback we want him to be. I'm kind, especially with no change at like offensive coordinator or anything like that either. Like, there's really nothing to really latch onto and hope that anything major is going to change. It's just unfortunate.
Yeah, I think the only thing, which is kind of more circumstantial, is that this is year 4 for Trevor Lawrence and year 3 under Doug Peterson. If this team does not perform, Doug Peterson's ass is grass. Like, spoiler, the viewer question that we'll never get to is like, which coach will be fired first? Not to say that he will get fired first, but Doug Peterson's seat has got to be hot, 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 hot. And obviously Jacksonville already picked up Lawrence's 5th year, but like, if he doesn't perform this year, we're looking at a guy who will probably get a second contract, but like not very lucrative at all. And I mean, what he's going is like a QB 14. That's where I have him on my personal rankings. Year, yeah. Where it's like he's one of those guys where if you take him, you take someone else with a little more upside. Like, it's just very puzzling, especially with how strong that team started off last year. Like, and the Jags too were such a popular team going into the year with Lawrence and Ridley and Etienne. Etienne was the only guy that actually consistently came through for you, but. Again, you look at other guys, even guys like Kirk Cousins, Brock Purdy. I'm more enthusiastic about picking them than a guy like Trevor Lawrence. I hope he proves me wrong. I would really like to see him kind of make that leap, because he was a great talent at Clemson, and we've seen glimpses, but having him last year was agony-inducing because he was so frustrating. So frustrating.
Just tough to make the argument for him, because at this point, the only hope for him to turn it around this year and take a step forward is just something clicks like in his head. Like something has to change within him, because nothing is really changing around him unless you think Brian Thomas Jr. is like the next Randy Moss. All right, Travis Etienne, Pat, RB10, 41.5 ADP. This is a guy who started pretty hot. I mean, finished well too in last year, like in fantasy last year overall, but kind of tailed off after being really a menace to society in the first half of the season. I think this is fine. Like, this is one of those where you mentioned at the top of the show, like one of those just inoffensive rankings. He's a young guy. He's been pretty good. The only, I guess, concern is that there has been some camp talk about Tank Bigsby again.
Tank Bigsby. When I did my 0 RB, like I drafted him, and that was when I think that our draft finally went off the rails, and I just started getting clowned so hard because
I wanted Tank Bigsby too, but
he was so bad. And like, yeah, sure, I'm sure he'll get more carries. Hopefully, he can do something with these carries. But even then, you're still looking at Etienne, who is, I'd consider him a bell cow, and I hope that offense is good. Like that's one of the offense where in theory, like, yeah, that offense will be good, but it's like, you're not quite as confident. Like, I would rather have Travis Etienne than Joe Mixon still at this point.
I think I would
just
agree.
Because I think the talent is a bit, he's a lot younger. The talent's there more. But again, I feel like running backs in this situation, like I feel like you kind of either you kind of just lost my train of thought because I read the chat and someone called me bald and it made me laugh. But
Classic.
But, I feel like I'm either going to take running back early or way late. So it's like I don't personally see a lot of Travis Etienne on my team, and it doesn't really have to do with what I think about him. Like, I think he's going to be very solid. I think he'll finish as a low-end RB1, high-end RB2, just where he's going.
Yeah, another player I probably won't be drafting either. Pat, we'll finish out with these receivers real quick. Christian Kirk, wide receiver 30, 46.9 ADP. Brian Thomas Jr., wide receiver 43, 73.1 ADP. Gabe Davis, wide receiver 64, 134.5 ADP. And then our boy Evan Ingram, tight end 8, 76.9 ADP. I have a fun little note on Christian Kirk because, Pat, I think I'm like fully in on Christian Kirk.
I loved him last year. You disagreed. Yeah. You were all Ridley. I was all Kirk.
So, that's why I'm in. So, look. Texas A&M alum near me. Ridley's gone, so what does that mean for Kirk? In terms of targets, not much. I mean, in 2022, he averaged 7.8 without Ridley, and then it went down to 7 with Ridley, so not much there. But in terms of high-value targets, Pat, means a lot because last season, Christian Kirk had 6 red zone targets. Granted, it was only in 12 games. He missed some time due to injury, putting him on pace for 8.5 over the course of the season. That would have been 57th in the league. In 2022, before Calvin Ridley got there, he had 22 red zone targets in 17 games, which was 5th in the league. So, with Calvin Ridley gone, who got the second most red zone targets in the NFL last year, that role gets opened up, in theory, back for Christian Kirk. Because, yes, Gabe Davis will take some and Brian Thomas will take some. Woo! But I think this team is going to lean way more into Christian Kirk being their wide receiver 1 again, while Davis and Brian Thomas are more of these field stretchers that, quite frankly, get things more open for Christian Kirk. So I'm definitely backing on him just now that this target tree, I think, is a little more consolidated.
Yeah, and, another inoffensive ranking here is Evan Ingram. Like, I feel like he is like the definition of like, what you're paying for. Like when he's going at tight end 8, I think he will very likely finish, between tight end 7 and tight end 10. Like he's very reliable, even though like we talk about like, I mean, the potential's there to be the number 2 target. You've got Gabe Davis, you got Brian Thomas, but Evan Ingram is very sturdy. Sorry, Giants fans. He's been real nice in Jacksonville. And that's just how I feel about this Jacksonville team. Like a lot of the rankings, you just look at them and you're like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Like, you're not particularly enthusiastic about it, but if I'm in a draft and I'm the 9th or 10th guy to take a tight end and Evan Ingram is sitting there, I'll gladly take him. But, is he a guy that I'm, like, actively targeting? No. But, if it happens, it happens, and I think you're going to be happy if it happens.
I think that's fair. Just as a quick note, back on Christian Kirk again, wide receiver 11 in half PPR in 2022, Pat, and he's currently going as wide receiver 30 on Underdog. Oh, yeah. So if you think he can even get close to what he used to be, and I think he'll get
I love him
at
based
least
on
close.
ADP,
yeah, definitely in on Christian Kirk. But folks, that'll do it for this episode of Brand Coverage. Thank you guys for tuning in once again. For Pat Gustafson, I'm Brandon Carney, and we'll see you guys next week.
Bye, Chig. Bye-bye.
All right, and a couple minutes here for viewer questions for those of you still hanging out. If you have any, Hunter said he just saw some lightning go out and his power might go out. That's unfortunate. You never want to hear that. Let's see if we got question. Oh, let's see. Professionally Certified Hater said, Bran, is that your actual name or a nickname for your channel? My name is Brandon. So, yes.
Doxing.
It's definitely not right there on my Instagram where I have 311,000 followers. I think that's like the only site where I actually have my name. I also say my name at the end of every show. Anyway, let's see what we've got here. Am I the only one who thinks Trevor Lawrence is overrated? Well, as we talked, I think I wouldn't say I consider him overrated. I consider him, he hasn't lived up to expectations, and a lot of people have realized that.
That's what I mean. I think he's very appropriately rated right now as a guy who's got a lot of potential, but just hasn't shown it. And I think, like, even from a fantasy perspective, QB 14 reflects that.
If you want to say he was like retroactively overrated, sure. I mean, he was touted as God coming out of college and just has not been particularly close to that in the NFL. But is he overrated now? Not really. What is your opinion on the Madden 2025 cover? We mentioned that at the top of the show. It's McCaffrey, man. He deserves it. He's the best running back in football. He has been for the last 3 or 4 or 5 years. Any year that he's not hurt, basically, he's the best running back in football. So might as well. I thought I was smart picking the Lawrence and Ridley fantasy stack, and the amount of times Ridley sold me is disgusting. My brother, again, in fantasy, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, because I wanted Trevor Lawrence pretty bad in fantasy. Honestly,
You're welcome.
Here's the thing. You say you're welcome. The only reason I didn't draft Trevor Lawrence is because I drafted Justin Fields like 3 rounds earlier, 4 rounds earlier, I think. So I didn't necessarily save anything. I ended up with CJ Stroud, who saved my season because I picked him up off waivers like week 4 or 5 or something. What is your opinion on top 10 wide receiver Rashid Shaheed? My opinion is you need medical attention if you are considering him top 10 in any sense.
My man's electric, though.
Trevor
We
Lawrence
need
is
to get
really
him on
kind
this
of-
show after my one-sided rivalry, like 2-week rivalry with him last
Rashid
year.
Shaheed. I pulled up, I don't know why I saw it, but I saw a clip from last year that was the one where you talked about Rashid Shaheed, and you were just like, I fucking hate Rashid Shaheed. And I was like, why, of all players?
He
for you to
he
hate?
cucked Alvin Kamara so fucking hard 2 years ago. Like, anytime you're like, oh, this is Kamara, and it was just Rashid.
Yeah.
And at the time, it's like, who the
know.
fuck is Rashid Shaheed? But the guy is electric, man. Oh, there was a woman there. These guys are right. I don't recognize women. I've never seen one before. So that's...
Who do you think will be offensive rookie of the year? It's probably a 2-horse race between Caleb and Jaden, unless Marvin Harrison really goes unignorably nuts.
That's such a
But
quarterback award.
perspective, Puka Nacua just broke every receiving record possible and didn't win offensive
Did not
rookie
win
of the
it.
year, just because Stroud had like a pretty good year. So, even if
Give me
Caleb
Jaden
Williams...
Daniels.
Yeah, I don't blame you for that. I think if Caleb Williams or Jaden Daniels have like even a decent year, they're going to win Offensive Rookie of the Year just because quarterbacks. Let's see what else we got here. How do you guys feel about a rushing quarterback / running back stack like Lamar, Henry, Jalen, Saquon, etc.? I mentioned earlier in regards to Richardson and Taylor. I don't love it. I mean, it's not something I'm going to actively avoid if value dictates, but it's not something I'm targeting either. Because in theory, only one guy gets to carry the ball. That's why a quarterback receiver stack is so nice, because you can get points from both guys on the same play. That's not
I
really
sort
the
of get it
case
though,
for quarterback,
because if
running
you've
back.
you've got Richardson and Taylor, assuming they score a touchdown, you're getting a piece of that unless you get vultured. Unless you get vultured, which that would be the worst case scenario with having that. But I get it. It's definitely not nearly as appealing as a QB wide receiver stack. Like you said, I'm not. I love both of those guys, but I'm not going in there. I want both of them. It's just if they're a part of my plan at a certain time and it falls in that way, then it happens. But it's not something not something I'm going to necessarily be going for.
Yeah, and I mean, you could say if they score a touchdown, you're probably going to get it. But then it's like, how far do you take that? Can I just draft the whole Colts offense? Because then that's 100% true. No matter what they score, I'm going to get the points for it. But it's like, is that optimal when you could just, mix things up a little bit? We'll do one more question here, Pat. Let's see. I don't know, guys. Weak takes. I just want to read this one. Weak takes on the Titans. Admittedly, other than Levis, took a flyer on him last year in between Kyler and Murray and Rodgers, and it didn't go well. Yeah, I just don't see a reason to be super bullish on the Titans. They're a weird team to me. So.
Yeah, I think out of all the teams we've done, it's the team I've just been the least enthusiastic about in general. Some teams I've had strong negative feelings about, and a lot, obviously, like the Colts. We glazed the Colts tonight, but Titans, you can't get a read on them because, again, I always talk about the Patriots, you still expect Bill Belichick. It's you still expect Mike Vrabel. It's going to be different, but it's you don't know what that different is going to be.
Yeah. And let's see. How about this? What are your top 5 O-lines? Yeah, I'm not doing O-line rankings. Sorry.
Raiders.
Random, but it may be unpopular. I think a healthy Joe Burrow is better than Josh Allen. Yeah, I don't even think that should be unpopular. Those guys are on, not that I fully agree with it, but those guys should be definitively on the same tier. Anybody who says that Josh Allen is clearly better, I think just has the recency bias of Burrow not playing last year. It's really all it is.
Burrow is definitely kind of a more put together, reliable guy. It's just that Allen's ceiling is crazy.
Yeah, I mean,
his ceiling is
it's
crazy, but I think people kind of forget just how good Joe Burrow is, and hopefully he's healthy for the whole year, and people are reminded that this guy is probably a top 5 quarterback in the league.
Yeah, and then, Pat, the final thing I'll leave off with is just a little fantasy nugget, and maybe I'll get to this when we talk about the NFC West. I got reminded of it because of how high I was on the Lawrence Ridley stack. You want to know the stack I'm low-key kind of thinking about toying with right now?
And it's NFC West.
NFC West.
Kyler and Harrison. Yep.
Which
is a solid stack.
Dangerously close to fully diving into that.
You've got the
and
stack, and then you've got the rushing potential for Kyler. That's a really
Exactly.
compelling stack. And Kyler's what I imagine he's going to is QB9.
Something like that.
something,
Yeah,
so,
I mean,
like-
I ranked him on my own as QB 8. I think he's right around 8 to 10 everywhere you look, basically.
So like that's pretty good value there. You're gonna get him more so in like the 6th or 7th round, and obviously MHJ is gonna be a lot earlier. But yeah, that I haven't thought about that. That is pretty compelling.
I'm thinking about it. It's one of those where it's like it's not the safest stack you can make, but it's definitely we love that upside.
That
over
Call
here,
of Duty
at least
stack, man,
with
is
me.
gonna be crazy.
Fuck. All right, guys, that will actually do it. Thank you for anyone who tuned in live for our show. We hopefully will see you next week right here, same day, same time, 7:30 Eastern, every Tuesday. For Pat Gustafson, I'm Brandon Carney. We'll see you guys next week.
Thanks, guys.